My fiancée suggested an open relationship to experience one cheat fling before marriage, so I ghosted her. I 34 male ghosted my fiancée 33 female after she asked for a temp open relationship before a wedding and then she cheated when I said no. I have rewritten this a few times in an attempt to shorten, but our history goes back since we were kids. I'm looking for some advice as to what to do when I get home in 2 days. I am changing all names. Obviously very sorry for the length of this monster. Jen and I had been friends since we were kids. Our parents were lifelong friends. We grew up together and started dating in our teens. It was like it was almost expected by our families. They had more plans for us than we did. When I was going for my master's I had to move to another city and Jen remained in our hometown working on her nursing degree. After a year of long-distance relationship we decided to remain friends and not have the pressure of our relationship control us. We both remained best friends and we both dated other people. It was weird because we both always knew this was temporary and we would end up back together at some point. I graduated and stayed in the city I got my master's in and started working in my field. I waited for a transfer back to my hometown and when I got it I was so happy. Jen was in a long-term relationship and he was a nice fellow, but I always got the feeling he was weary of our friendship. I understood the vibe and stepped back out of respect. Although she and I would talk several times a year, my boss and mentor I would call Paul 44 male was a great guy and we became good friends. He taught me the ropes and one day came down from the ivory tower and wanted to talk. He explained there was an open position in a foreign city for 2 years and it would be advertised shortly. He explained the position and even though the money wasn't huge, all expenses such as rent, hotel and expenses related to travel were covered. Basically I would be based in Tokyo and have to travel once in a while to other Asian cities for a few days here and there. I thought about it, talk to my friends and parents. Paul said it was a position but would be a great opportunity to prove myself and climb the ladder. I thought why not, I could save most of my salary and gain valuable experience. Paul said he would speak to the old man and if I wanted it he would recommend me. He explained he himself did something similar years ago and it helped his career, so off I went. The first year was horrible, getting used to the culture and social rules not only in Japan but the other countries I would visit for work. One thing that surprised me was how available women were everywhere I went. They loved foreigners. I got to sample the delights of the Orient. These weren't third world women, most of them were highly educated. I had many friends with benefits and clearly told all of them I wasn't interested in long-term or marriage as I only was staying temporarily. I ended up doing 2 more years. Paul would visit several times a year on vacation or to supervise some work and I will admit we had some greasy times in a few cities, that is Angela City in the Philippines and a few others. Contract was over and I went back home, put a nice down payment on a house just outside the city. After living in a city of 37 million I needed some space. I was home for a month and while visiting my parents Jen was there. She and the other guy had broken up a year ago and we started talking more seriously. Even though we always had contact over the years, we started dating again. I held off having sex as much as I wanted because I was afraid really of what would happen. I had developed an addiction of having various partners while in Asia and were trying to control that desire before Jen and I got serious. I mean everyone including Jen knew I dated, but on social media there was being frequent photos of me and different women. My mother called me a whim a few times and well, to be truthful it kind of stung. Now is when things start to fall apart. Jen and I slept together and for a lack of a better word she was very surprised. She said I was different. And it was never like that before. She meant it like I had gained a lot of experience, to put it nicely. She asked me some questions and I admit I did trickle truth her. I didn't tell her the exact number because even if it was divided by 3 it was scary. I had no doubt that I was and could be faithful to her. The seed I had inadvertently put in her mind that night would create some serious issues later. Now of course our families were thrilled we were together. It was always supposed to be this way. We were doing great and after speaking to her parents I proposed. She moved in and everything was great. There were some what I thought were some red flags, like asking if I was happy with her. Fast forward to December of 2019. Wedding was planned in June of 2020. We all know how 2020 went, don't we? Christmas was great and close to New Year's we would have the first day. I was sitting down doing some work on the PC and Jennifer, her cousin Tammy 32 female, were looking through some wedding stuff. I've also known Tammy since we were kids and we were cool. Jen asked if we can talk and Tammy walks into the living room and sits on the sofa. I want to sit at the table to talk to Jen. She starts by saying for me to not interrupt or freak out. She wants to talk about something. She then explains our difference in the bedroom and says she believes I wouldn't be satisfied with her and eventually I would cheat on her and she didn't want our future children and relationship to be ruined if I stray. So here I was thinking great, I'm about to get dumped. Just as I am thinking things can't get worse I hear the infomercial guy in my head, but wait, there's more. Jen asked me if I was willing to open the relationship so she could gain more experience and it would help her feel less insecure. She states I should not be worried as I'm the only man she ever loved and that's why none of her relationships had ever led to marriage. I did with her on that point, as I felt the same. Now of course I think this is a joke and she is not serious at all. This really can't be happening, right? Since this was a year and a half ago, I will try my best to recall the main points. She says she will only be with random people and never with someone we know or work with. It won't happen with the same person twice, and no emotional connection. I was like, what the F? When I realized she wasn't joking, I lost my breath. Didn't think it was possible for a heart to skip a beat and jump to the center of my throat. I'm not an angry or violent person, but now I'm yelling. I'm starting to understand why Tammy stuck around close by. I yelled, Tammy, did you put her up to this? Tammy says she is just there to support Jen. Wow, thanks so much. So then Jen says I'm free to do as I wish under the same rules, and I said no. I am so pissed at this point, and even writing this now I am raging. I then said I don't want one night stands, I just want one person. She says who? I looked at Tammy and nodded in the eyes and said I want to F Tammy. Now I get out of Jen, and Tammy wasn't expecting that, and she's a bit red in the face and now uncomfortable. Jen says no, she is family and someone we both know, and it is gross for me to even suggest it. I am now totally in bizarro world. Where the hell did this come from? We argued back and forth for a bit, and I told her if she does this the relationship is over. I am totally against this and I love her and we can work through everything together, but not this. I stormed off, grabbed my pillow and went to the guest room. I could hear them downstairs for a bit but couldn't hear what they were saying. It would have been a hilarious joke if it didn't last for an hour of conversation. I didn't sleep all night and was a bag of crap at work the next day. Jen started 2 weeks of night that day, so at least we wouldn't be home together for that time and we could both cool down and revisit this later. Dinner would be in the fridge for me every day with an I love you note. She would text frequently, but I kept my answers short. Thursday night of the next week of her night shift, I go to the PC to work over some files and I noticed an email notification on her account, and it's a hotel reservation for a good hotel that's close to my office. I know it well as I go often with coworkers. I'm thinking she's supposed to be working, but maybe she wants to apologize and take me for a night out. The next morning I'm waiting for her text or call to invite, but only asking me how my day was. Then she says she's so happy she only has to work one more night of the night shift. How does she have one more night and a hotel reservation? I was sick, stressing in my office, started looking through some dating sites, especially profiles with no pics. I can't find anything. Paul pops in and asks me if I want to go for lunch and sees I'm a mess. He asks what's up and I tell him Paul is hard. Men go their own way but has always supported my relationship with Jen. He suggests we go get lunch at some hotel restaurant and I scream no, not that place. He didn't know that part. We actually go for lunch and I'm sick to my stomach, can't eat, I don't even want to drink. He says I can't work like this and I can take as much leave as I can, paid and unpaid if needed. I told him I can't be there at my house anymore, I can't see her, and a part of me wants to believe it isn't true. I rush home and put as much of my crap in my car as I can and go back to the office. Paul says let's go stake out the hotel and wait for her to check in. I mean, I have no idea, detective, I'm more like Inspector Cliff, so I was really resisting this, but I really had to know. So we go set up in a lounge bar and I start pounding the back and waiting, still hoping this wasn't real. Around 6:30 Paul taps me on the shoulder and there she is, the front desk and not in uniform. I want to strangle her, scream, spit, cry, I don't know. We wait for 10 minutes after she gets in the elevator and Paul and I walk to the front desk. I asked the reception put me through to J blank blank room and it rings. As soon as she answered I just started yelling into the receiver and sounded confused. Janet told you if you did this it would be over. I am done waiting, off relationship over. And I hung up and got my butt out of there. Nowhere to go. I went back to Paul's and now my phone is lighting up. The only person I called was my dad and I explained in PG rated terms what happened and I need to leave town for a bit. It wasn't a discussion and I feel bad for how I spoke to my old man. Phone didn't stop for 2 days. Everyone under the sun called me and I didn't answer. I didn't know what to do. The only way I could explain how I felt was like walking around underwater. Paul mentioned some financial things I should deal with to protect myself. I wasn't even thinking about that. The house, wedding loans for the car, we kept separate accounts, and one for the wedding and one for house related bills. I couldn't care less. The next day I emailed Jen and said this would be our last contact and I was leaving the city for a while and the wedding and everything else was off. I called my dad back and spoke with him at length, and while he was crushed he understood I needed time and space. He said he still hopes that we could work it out. 10 days later I boarded a plane and traveled to Bali. I never answered any of her or anyone's messages or emails. I don't know if she left the hotel that night or stayed. I didn't care. I eventually landed in Bali and climbed into a bottle for the next month and went offline, with the exception of my dad and work. Didn't even care if I got fired. I wish I could say I enjoyed myself, but was mostly just drunk. I felt a lot of rage and shame and hate about how things went down. I kept in touch with Paul about my leave and after 3 weeks he asked if I could run back to Tokyo to look after some things. We talked about the new global virus and I mentioned coming back to Canada to settle things there, as I was hearing rumors of potential lockdowns. I got to Tokyo on March 1st and it felt good to get back to work, even if it was just a little after hearing lockdowns were coming. Paul mentioned me getting back to Canada, but I said it's only going to be 30 or 60 days. I need some time to plan my next move. 30 to 60 days FME. I was still in Japan for another year before I got vaccinated, but by this time I didn't really want to go home. My house had rented out and I was talking to family but refused any info about Jen. On September 21st I received news my dad had a heart attack and was doing well but would need a triple bypass. This surgery is serious, not as serious as it was 40 years ago, but I still want to see him, and just in case, I know when I get home it is just going to turn into a crap show, and I really didn't want that. I just want to see my folks and thank Paul for all he has done for me, even as selfish as that was, but I know I'm going to have to see her and I have no idea how I'm going to feel or think. I'm so sorry for the length of this. Even still, I left a lot out. Any advice, tips or insults would be appreciated. I'm flying out in 4 hours and will land in about 24 hours. Update: after landing I went to see my dad. He is looking good and actually looking forward to a surgery. Mom is doing well, but obviously masking concern. I spent almost the first 24 hours by his side and I think we talked about everything under the sun, but nothing heavy. I don't want to stress him. I told him I here for him, but I am using this trip to reorganize my life, close some doors and open some new on day 2. Paul and me met up at a local spot close to the office. Paul is already driving the booze into him already. We talked for a bit back and forth talking about my dad work, and he asked me if I had any contact with Jen, which I said no to. He then informs me the old man, the boss, wants to see me, but considering my father it can wait. I know I'm in deep and tell him I may as well get it over with. I have a list of things I need to accomplish this month. I may as well start knocking things off of it. Meeting Jen is one of them. I entered the office for the first time in what seemed like forever. Many faces missing, a few new ones and the usual suspects. A few people nodded at me and greeted me. We headed up to the old man's office and I had never been there before. We walked in and he motions for us to sit down. I had never spoken to the old man before. He does walk the floor from time to time, but people just part like Moses spreading the Red Sea. This is the conversation that followed. Old man: good morning, gentlemen. This is a closed meeting and anything discussed is private, blah blah blah. The old man just starts going off on a rant about responsibility and dedication, and he does have some good points, I have to admit. He looks at Paul and asks why they should keep me around. Paul says he does great work. He has saved accounts and acquired many new ones, plus we can't find anyone to do the job for the 20% below market salary like we are paying him. What the F then, Paul? The old man and Paul start maniacally laughing like that bar scene in the Goodfellas movie. The old man wipes away a tear from his eye and tell us, Paul, that's why he's the best VP he is. I make a good salary, but come on man, I feel quite slighted. The old man looks at me and leans in. Listen kid, I know you had some problems with your woman, so let me give you some advice. He says some guy's name he is quoting. I don't know if I'm remembering word for word, but this is the gist of it. God gives women eyebrows, she plucks them out and draws on new ones. God gives the woman a face as she paints on a new one over it. God gives her breasts and she buys a push-up water bra. God gives her a form and she's still not satisfied. She buys slim-fitting clothes to change that form. If God himself cannot please her, then how can you, brother? Please don't kill yourself. Well, that kind of blew my mind a bit, I must say. Old man looks at Paul. The first can trust you to handle this properly. Your mother will kill me if I have to fire you. So now it kind of hits me. They're effing related. Paul and I walk out and I look at him and say 20% man, really? He puts his arm around me and says, don't worry about that, I got you covered. So am I getting fired or disciplined? No, dumbass, you're getting promoted. And he puts his arm around me and kisses me on the side of the head. You could have told me that beforehand, you dick. Nah, it was much funnier this way. I missed you kid. Now let's go get effed up. It's 8:30 in the morning. Paul, who does that? Do you still have a lot to learn about enjoying life? Doesn't surprise me with this guy. Really, what should I expect from someone who got all liquored up before on ski and got into a fist fight with a monkey? Got his ass kicked as well, I might add, at the hot springs in Japan. We did end up getting pissed up. We talked about work and what was going to happen. We talked about Jan and he advised me that I really should meet her and get closer. He said we both did stupid things, but we are good people. Once I get closure, then I will be able to move forward in my future without an anchor of emotion holding me back. He said once that is resolved, then we can talk about my employment future, what I want to do and where I want to go. So that was checked off the list. At least I still have a job that is looking good. There is still the matter of Jan, which has been consistently in my thoughts. I unblocked her on Facebook and scrolled through to prepare me for what was to come. I sent a PM and asked if we could meet for dinner sometime soon. We only exchanged pleasantries and are meeting for dinner in the next few days. That will be my next update. Dinner. I agreed to meet at a restaurant a few hours after she got off work. Now going into this, I was afraid of two things: that my anger would remain and I would act accordingly, or my love for her would remain and I would act accordingly. I was hoping to find a comfortable medium in the gray area. All my plans flew out the window the moment she walked through the door. She looked wonderful. She smiled and walked over and my stomach was in my throat. I wasn't this nervous when we lost our virginity together. We're sharing a short awkward hug and I could smell my favorite perfume on her. Is she about to love Bambi or play some emotional tricks? As she in another relationship and here to show me what I miss? The rings on her finger, even the one I gave her. We talked about my dad first and she told me she always checked in on him when she was on shift and assured me his surgeon for the upcoming bypass was one of the best. We kick around small talk like her extreme workload during the pandemic and what I was seriously getting ready to crack. I can assure you I was calm and collected on the outside but falling apart underneath. I told myself I needed this to consolidate these feelings in order to move on. Finally, it seemed we were dancing around the elephant in the room for a painful amount of time and she finally looked at me and her face changed. The whole conversation after that is a blur. I will recount it to the best of my ability. First, I want to tell you how sorry I am for what happened and for hurting you. Are you sorry you got caught or actually sorry for how you hurt me? Of course I'm sorry for what I did to you, what it did to our lives and our future. I threw it away because of my insecurity. So did you plan it because of your insecurity, or you secretly wanted to punish me for the people I was with when we weren't a couple? Maybe both, but let me say that any other man that was in my life before we were engaged, I never left like I loved you. Tim, her ex before me, cheated on me because he always told me that you could never compete with the feelings I had with you. We broke up for that reason. I did not know this, and to be honest, I never felt bad. He cheated. I never wanted you to know I was going to sleep with another man. I thought I could emotionally detach from it, and even if you found out, we could work through it like everything we ever experienced before. You thought very wrong. It was probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced. I didn't need you to be perfect or experienced. I just needed you to be mine. All of them, Jen. Every single one could never add up to what I felt with you, but now I'm thinking, was it a real feeling or the projection of the dream of us that our family wanted, or the fantasy we expected? It started to get emotional, and Jen excused herself and went to the washroom to collect herself. We were in a good medium-sized restaurant and only a few tables reoccupied. Paul tagged along for some support, as some of you mentioned, and strategically placed himself in the sealed-off lounge. I looked over to get some encouragement or a thumbs up, and he is having a rather animated conversation with two rather attractive ladies, laughing and hand gestures, the whole 9 yards. He finally looks over and gives me a questioning thumbs up, and I know that everything's okay. He smiled, then gave me the middle finger with a smirk and went back to his extracurricular activities. This effing guy, seriously. Jen comes back and we resume. Is there anything you want to ask about that night? It can't be undone. It doesn't matter. Nothing happened. I wasn't even sure if I could have done it when you called the room. It scared the crap out of me and I raced down to the lobby, but you were already gone. It doesn't matter now. I'm not here to rehash the past. I want us to work on moving forward. Can you forgive me? Of course I can forgive you, and I do forgive you. You're not a horrible person. You just made a horrible series of choices which put us here. It is not all your fault. I should have been more open and understanding of your worries as well. I was going through a cycle of emotions from love to anger to regret. Part of me wanted to yell at her and another part of me wanted to take her home and forget this never happened. For the past few weeks I've been watching these Reddit videos on YouTube, preparing myself for this conversation, and seeing these men punishing themselves for what their significant others had done, much worse damage than the actual cheating. I was determined to not be that simple. I started looking at her with the old man's words running through my mind. Painted face, painted nails, and form-fitting dress. Do I even really know her? If this is her outward appearance, is her mind the same? Are all their minds the same? I hardened myself. What now? Is there anything in the future for us? I want you to remember when we were kids and walking home from the park, that vicious dog had approached us. I got in front of you on instinct to protect you, to save you. The owner called the dog and it took off. Just mere seconds, really, but when you were 9, that's pretty scary. All these years later I stood in front of you, loving you and protecting you for whatever would come at us. But this time when I stood in front of you, giving you everything I had, you stick a knife in my back just like the frog and the scorpion this time, and really hit her like a bolt, and she lowered her head and sobbed a bit. I wasn't finished. I needed to get her out. I'm sorry. She takes out the ring box and slides it across the table to me. I leave it there. I don't want this. I am pissed off. You think I want to be sitting here with my heart jumping out of my throat and you crying? I want to be home playing with the baby. We would have by now. I can't remember anything I said. In the next few minutes she began sobbing and holding her hands in her face. I have said some shitty things in my life, but that one takes the cake. I apologized and said that went too far. It's not me. Out of anger mode. The rest of the conversation calmed down, and after I'd blown off that steam we actually had a normal talk just about life in the future, because our parents are so close and her mom and dad are like my number 2 family and vice versa. We talked about how we could coexist in this realm as friends. Reconciliation is not on the table. She got up to leave and we hugged for a long time. I'm going to leave this here and finish the rest off tomorrow. It's been a long few days. Hey guys, so my advice for you is to find a spouse from a good background with a good family relationship and faith.